been a long time since I've made one of these videos. It's been a lot of months and I'm drunk right now, and I've never done one of these videos drunk before, so I guess we'll see if that makes any difference. I don't know if the lights on either side of me are on the camera. The microphone is a little bit in the camera, but hopefully none of that is a problem for anyone watching. Not that I really give a fuck, but yeah. I always struggle to remember the things that I've said in the past. So as always, I wonder whether or not I just repeat myself over and over again. I think that since my last video, which I titled The Pointlessness of Life, if anything, I've just fallen deeper and deeper into nihilism. Now, I remember a lot of maybe comments or messages that I got from my last video of people talking about different reasons why my life has value. And I suppose trying to give some kind of counter argument to the points that I was making in that video in a very kind and polite way, because it seemed like most people interpreted that video as me being depressed or having some kind of mental illness, or there being something wrong with me. And I suppose there's nothing I can do if all of you assume that I'm in denial. But the points that I made in that specific video, or points that I feel make logical, genuine sense, I don't think that much of it comes from an emotional place. I don't think that I'm overwhelmingly sad and depressed with life, and that as a result of that sadness, I decide there's no point to anything. I think that there not being a point to anything is the foundation, and that I can get upset and depressed as a result of specific events in my life, and that maybe my nihilistic foundation kind of acts as some kind of catalyst to that sadness and depression. But at the same time, there are other times where I feel really calm and content with life. My nihilism acts just as much as a catalyst to that as it does to the depression. I don't want to say that my nihilism is inherently good or bad. I mean, as a result of my nihilism, I don't believe in good or bad really. I think that one important thing I want to say, even though I don't really care what anybody thinks, I understand that nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, a lot of people aren't really going to understand me they're never going to understand the way that I think and the way that I feel and what I am. But I just want to say that, like, when I talk about all of this nihilistic shit, and I talk about how I don't really care about nothing, and how I recognize that from an objective point of view, nothing really matters, and everything is worthless at the end of the day. And even the things that I decide matter from my own personal, individual, subjective point of view aren't gonna matter the second that I stop existing, when I die. When I say all these things, it's not just some result of some stereotypical cliche young adult depression. It's not just the result of some classic young adult being exposed to the big questions of life for the first time and struggling to come up with an answer. And so I give up and say, there is no answer. And I'm as open-minded as I possibly think I can be. And I recognize that the way I think now isn't going to be the way that I think forever. And the way that I think now is almost definitely going to change, you know. But I don't think that any of that takes away from the credibility of my thoughts now. I mean, I could be in my 30s and say the same thing. I suppose a lot of people might look at me and see that I'm somebody in my early 20s. And if you're in your 30s, maybe you'd think, this kid has so many years of learning and development to go through. Clearly he's just being a little bit reckless and wild right now with his philosophies and outlooks on life. But I think that even when I reach my 30s, you could say the same thing if you were in your 40s. And the way that you think when you're in your 40s is going to be different to the way that you think when you're in your 50s. I think all of that is a possibility. I also think it's a possibility that the way I think now is going to be the way that I think all the way through the decades. So the reality is there's no guarantee that I'm going to change my mind. And even if you could guarantee that I change my mind, that doesn't take away from the credibility of my thoughts and my feelings. My outlook on life isn't somehow less valuable or less true to me just because of the arbitrary number of years that I happen to have existed on this planet. You know? I can't escape the thoughts in my head that life is pointless. There is no meaning to any of this. I didn't choose to be here. And I'm not gonna choose to leave here either. I suppose even if I commit suicide one day, the reality is that I'll only kill myself as a result of my thoughts and feelings at that point in time. And you know, if you really think about it, you don't have any control over anything in life. Not even your own thoughts, and not even your own feelings. That's one of the most interesting things that I've been contemplating lately, is how much control we have over our own thoughts and feelings. because everybody has this illusion of control, right? Okay, so the first step is, where do our thoughts come from? Because you don't decide to think something, right? In order for that to be a possibility, you would have to have some kind of list, some infinite, endless list of possible thoughts that you could have in any given moment. And you would have to go through that list. And you would have to decide what thought you were going to have. And even within that impossibility, you have to take into account the fact that the decision that you make of what thought you're going to have in any given moment in of itself would be a thought. Which means you then have to contemplate, what is it that made you think about the thought that was the decision of what thought you were going to have? It's difficult to talk about this without sounding like I'm just a crazy person. But the only thing that makes sense to me is that every single thought and feeling that I have was not my choice. And the second step is, I feel like I'd be able to explain this better if I prepared and if I was sober, but I'm going to try anyway. Even if you decide and you accept that the thoughts that come to your mind are not your own, they aren't decided by you, whatever you are. They are just things that appear as a byproduct of consciousness and our minds and our brains. Even if you accept that, a lot of people would then fall back on the safety net of saying, okay, fair enough, I don't generate the thoughts that exist in my mind, but once the thoughts are there, I can then see them or feel them, and I can make decisions based on those thoughts, and those decisions are my own. I wonder if I can come up with an example. Let's say that I walk into a shop and I see a bottle of wine. I don't like wine, but they always keep vodka behind the counter, so this is not going to work for the analogy. Let's just say that I'm the kind of pussy that likes wine, and I see a bottle of wine, and the thought appears in my mind, I wonder if I should steal this wine. I wonder if I could grab this wine bottle, stuff it into my jacket, and walk out. I wonder if I could get away with theft like that. How did that thought appear in my mind? Did I decide to think about potentially stealing this wine? Of course not, that wouldn't make sense. And if I did decide to think about it, what was the thought that made me think about deciding to steal the wine? And if that was a thought that I created, then what was the thought that created that thought? If you go down the rabbit hole, you realize that the source of your thoughts and feelings can't ever be whatever you consider to be you. Sorry, I know I sound crazy. Okay, so the thought appears in my mind. I didn't decide to think this. The thought just happened. And maybe you think it's not that crazy to acknowledge the fact that you are not the generator of your thoughts. Maybe you think that's fine, everybody has random thoughts that pop into their heads, but once the thought appears in my mind, the thought of, should I steal this bottle of wine? Then it's down to you. Now I am in control. I am in control to decide whether or not I'm going to steal this wine. And maybe that thought process is complex, maybe it's deep, maybe it's layered. Maybe I weigh up the pros and cons of stealing this wine and whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea. Maybe I'll do that. But the thing is, the hypothetical person that came into the shop 10 minutes before me that had the exact same thought as me, what if they decided to steal it without a second thought? What if they decided to steal it because they thought of all of the pros but none of the cons? Why didn't they consider the cons? Why didn't the cons appear in their minds as thoughts? And why did the cons appear in my mind? Maybe there would be specific pros that the other individual would think about that wouldn't appear in my mind. Maybe there are certain cons that would appear in my mind that wouldn't appear in that person's mind. And those pros and cons that we consider to be contributing factors towards the decision that we make are completely out of our control, which surely then means that the decision that we make is not a result of us in any capacity. The decision itself as to whether or not I'm going to steal this bottle of wine is just as much as an uncontrollable thought as every other thought that came before it. Which means that every single decision that I make in my life is not my own. It's such a mindfuck to contemplate. And I know it's probably just too easy to roll your eyes at me right now. And because I'm drunk and because I'm crazy, it's easy to dismiss what I'm saying. And I don't care what any of you think. I can't escape the simple fact that this is what makes logical sense to me. Every single decision that I'm going to make for the rest of my life is going to be inevitable by nature, by principle. Because whatever the fuck I am, I'm not the source of any of my thoughts and any of my feelings. And all of my decisions will either be thoughts or feelings or both, which means I am not the source of any of my decisions. In a way that's comforting, you know. I've always been the kind of person that takes 100% responsibility for my life and responsibility for my decisions and my actions and everything, you know. So this is such a weird fucking curveball, because this mentality that I don't have any control over my own thoughts or feelings or decisions or actions is like a complete 180 to the mentality of taking 100% responsibility for myself and my own life and where I am and what happens. It's such a contradiction, you know. And it's a difficult one to understand fully and to accept. And in a weird way, I kind of feel like what I'm most comfortable with right now is the hypocrisy of taking responsibility for my decisions and also acknowledging that I have no controlling power in those very decisions. I can't remember why I started talking about this. I was talking about nihilism at the beginning, and then I started talking about decisions and thoughts and feelings. What was I talking about before? I wonder if I should end this video now. There is a part of my mind that wanted to talk about something else. Okay, I'm gonna end this video now. so there isn't too much dead space. There was more I was going to talk about, but I suppose I can tell myself that can be told in a future video. Alright, bye.